Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, good night, wherever you might be in this wonderful world of ours. Welcome to In the Spotlight with me, your host, Seamus Curry, wellbeing consultant, mental health practitioner, motivator, facilitator, and trainer. It's great to have you with us this morning, wherever you might be in this wonderful world. And I hope the sun is shining where you are today. It's definitely shining in our neck of the woods because I have a wonderful, wonderful guest to bring on for you this morning for your listening pleasure. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you again to all those who continue to support me, follow me, and subscribe to my channels. It's so nice to see you on board, and it's so nice to welcome new members and new subscribers and new followers. So if you haven't already subscribed and if you haven't already followed, the links to both channels will be available on the comment section and in the show notes of this particular episode. You don't want to miss out today's episode because I have a wonderful human being doing amazing work in the world of motivation, confidence, performance coaching. She is a performance lifestyle coach, ladies and gentlemen, who has worked with Olympians and Paralympians. She is a founder of her own consultancy coaching company called WinWell. She's also a mental health trained practitioner. She's also a Google resilience speaker, which is something that I want to probe on a little bit more. Resilience is one of my areas of expertise, and I'd like to see how Google play with resilience. She's also a board member, she's also a wife, and she's an amazing human being. I don't know how she gets to fit it all in her day, but let's see. Dawn Sanders, you're very welcome to In the Spotlight. How are you this morning?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm delighted to be here this morning and share some stories, and hearing your stories as well, Seamus, have been inspirational to me. So thank you for having me today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Dawn. Dawn, for those who don't know you, and we've had a couple of conversations, and I feel I'm really standing on the shoulder of giants today. And you've gone before quite a lot of us, and you've been in the business for a while now, doing some amazing work. For those who don't know you, Dawn, tell our listeners who you are and what brings you to In the Spotlight today.
I'm Dawn Sanders. As you say, I'm a mother, a wife, a daughter, and I've loved sport for many years. I grew up wanting to be a professional footballer. It wasn't a thing as I was a kid. It wasn't an opportunity once I left primary school to do that thing. So even seeing the growth of women's sport in the last 20 years has been hugely rewarding for me. So I went to university, studied a communication and media studies degree, not knowing what I wanted to do, but found rugby and found women's rugby. So I had a good few years throwing a ball around, meeting some amazing women who literally put their body on their life for their life. No, try that one again, James. Sorry. So I'm Dawn Sanders. I'm a mother, a wife, a daughter, and I have loved sport for many, many years. I wanted to be a professional footballer. I had Peter Shilton's goalkeeper outfit when I was a kid at Christmas, but was told, I guess, at an early age I couldn't do that beyond primary school. So I went to university, studied a communication degree, not really sure what I would do with that, but wanted to go to Loughborough and be in a sports environment. Where I found women's rugby and found a great community of women to belong to who literally put their body on the line for you. And had some great years playing for Harlequins, Saracens, England A, toured a little bit with those teams that enabled me to do a bit of Forrest Gump, no skill whatsoever, just gave me the ball and I ran as quickly as I could, really. And then alongside that, I guess, developing my own career in elite sport. So was really interested about the person behind the performer. We see our athletes on the Olympic and Paralympic stage on our televisions. but what makes them tick? Who are they? What are their lives like behind them? So I joined an organization called the English Institute of Sport at the time, predominantly working with a GB badminton squad as their lifestyle well-being coach, and have recruited and managed people who do my job across gymnastics, athletics, swimming, powerlifting, to name a few. And then when badminton lost their funding in the uh, December of 2016, I realized we needed to do more to support our athletes in transition. You know, there's a huge amount of connection to that identity as an elite athlete, and what is it when you're not that thing anymore. So championed, I guess, the UK Sports Institute, UK Sport, and some of those funding organisations to ensure that we support athletes for up to 2 years now in transition, just to enable them to connect or reconnect to their strengths and their values and who are they as a person beyond that performance identity. So absolutely love coaching people in that space, and I do that part-time. And then, as you said, I've got my own consultancy business where I support other performance teams and performance environments to integrate some of these things. I'm hugely passionate about making sure that people can thrive in these environments as people as well as performers.
Yeah, and as well as that, I understand you're also a podcaster and you have your own show as well, where you speak to those subjects in particular, but also look at performance, productivity. What does that mean, and what does success mean, and using those specific definitions, right?
Yeah, and it's been fascinating, kind of, I'm really keen to see where else this is needed, wanted, explored outside of sport. It's a culture I know. But even speaking to people within construction or within
Mm,
engineering, those pressures may be slightly different, because of the context and the environment people need to thrive in. But it's people at the end of the day, and it's about having really good and intentional coaching conversations.
yeah.
What does this mean for the individual? How do we integrate this into your daily working environment? How do we integrate personal and professional development and well-being into your key performance indicators or your objectives or your development plans,
Mm.
not just technically, but as a person as well. And those themes seem to be coming loud and clear in those sort of conversations that I'm having outside of sport as well.
It's interesting, and I suppose it leads me to my next question: is there too much of a focus on productivity and not enough focus on personality and performance?
I think, and I would love to make a case that it does lead to productivity. It's not an either or conversation. I think certainly
Mm.
in elite sport, we've had to make a performance case quite rightly.
Yeah,
Every day counts towards you winning an Olympic or Paralympic medal.
yeah.
We all have to align to that to help athletes to achieve their goals and their ambitions. And every day lost or wasted to injury or illness is a day another athlete will be training. So I think we've worked quite hard to say that it's not an either or conversation. It's a well as,
Yeah.
and that we can aid performance, we can aid productivity. It does help with leadership development. It does help with performance retention. It does help with attraction of talent, and that by taking these things that are relatively cheap and easy to do,
Mm.
then you may see some returns from that in productivity, as well as obviously me making the case for it's the decent human thing to do, to provide a duty of care to the people that you that are in your environment for those years while they're in your care, really.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very easy to measure performance in terms of productivity. Like, you've got a range of tasks to do, and you do them to the best of your ability. You almost check the list off. And it's interesting there, what you've said, in adding, a section on wellness or well-being to appraisals, to KPIs, to objectives, and being able to measure that. Is there are organizations, in your opinion, fearful about that? Are they fearful about asking the questions around wellness, or did they not know how to ask them effectively or correctly? Or what's your own perception of that, Dawn, in the work that you do? Or simply do organizations just ignore wellness as a subject and just focus on the tangible, the touchable, the task-based productivity in order to succeed and perform?
No, I think organizations do and need and want to take this seriously. What I've seen, I think, a little bit is there is perhaps more emphasis on mental ill health. So
Yeah.
employee assist programs and making sure that that's in place to provide reactive care, and obviously some great benefits and attracting talent and people into your cultures through benefits and benefit support, or wellness programs or gym programs, or keeping people fit and healthy. Where I'd love to see more, I guess, is this sort of a positive mental health approach
Yeah.
where you're coaching people to prevent mental ill health,
Yeah.
to develop cultures that talk to this, to train managers to have these types of conversations, to train managers to see how you express this in a development plan for the employee within your care. That's where I would love to see this move to.
Mm.
So I think that's where the training and development comes from a little bit. I think there's definitely a need, and sometimes when budgets get squeezed, and especially what's going on in the world right now, I can see why it can't always be a priority. But yeah, I'd love to get within organizations for them to get some measurable scores on some of this stuff, so you can genuinely see the impact. The conversation I had with Emma Deutsch from Nissan, who's one of their most senior female engineers, they were providing some data around impact and the why bother. I think, if we can get in organizations and see the why bother, and show impact, then there's a bigger case for making this change, I think.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you're right, we do live in a very fluid, flexible, changeable economy right now where, cash is key to some extent. And I suppose in terms of the work that you do, is it about encouraging that? And you've mentioned already the sad fact and reality that, funding in terms of Olympic sports is under review constantly. And you mentioned there in terms of your turn, in terms of your introduction, when funding was lost, in the badminton team, and people were faced with the reality of not having a sense of purpose. How did you work with that team to transition them to a life beyond badminton and into the cold, harsh reality of living the life outside sport? Was that a difficult transition, Dawn?
Yeah, because obviously I was facing it too. I didn't have a role
Yeah.
in that space, but I could talk to you about this forever, because it's almost led to my life works, I guess, about the bit
Mm.
that I ultimately I'm passionate about supporting people is understanding and managing and dealing with change. Through COVID, we've all been through change now, haven't we?
We
So,
have.
and we will be in a constant state of change. So if we can enable people to understand change and understand transition, even the term is used interchangeably, isn't it? But
Mm.
we've really worked hard to kind of understand the difference. So change might be an event that happens to you in life. You lose your job, you move home, marriage, divorce, a loss of a loved one. That's change. For me, transition is that emotional and psychological response to that, what we learn about ourselves through that process or moment of change in our lives to equip us to manage change in the future.
Mm.
I love to coach people, around their autobiographical timeline, because that leaves us clues, I think, in terms of how people have managed change in the past.
Mm.
We've all had highs and lows in our life that we can express, and what was challenging our values, perhaps for us to feel threatened or uncertain in that period of life. But then what strengths got us through that and through that dip in life to pull us above it and rise above it and enable us to take that first next step in the next chapter of your life. As well as the people who've supported you through it. So, I love coaching people through their autobiographical timeline. Do a lot of stuff around values and strengths work. A lot of people during this period can't connect to anything that they've got to offer the world, because they just don't see the value, and I see the value in those awesome people, and I want them to see it too. So coaching people to connect to that change, and then kind of understanding where in the world would your needs be met. A lot of our athletes, their whole needs are met through elite sport. Their sense of community, their financial security, their self-worth, everything is, even what they wear each day is given to them through one source. And you might need to find various different sources of physical health, of belonging, of community, of career development. So it's kind of where in the world are your needs going to be met, and then kind of helping our athletes a bit to make it happen. Quite often I've been given sort of a blank page of someone's CV because, you never had to do this before, or what does a LinkedIn profile mean, or I've never been interviewed before, or not had the confidence to go for an interview before. So have some great stories of athletes kind of who've struggled in that space, and helping them to connect to that, and then going on to thrive in whatever that next chapter is, really, and managing change beyond it, which feels hugely rewarding.
Absolutely, and you've kind of innately mentioned there that it is a journey, that it is a transition. It's not a wham bam, thank you, ma'am, thank you scenario where you have somebody for a couple of sessions and then they're fixed, right? It's very much a journey for people, and that journey takes time, right?
Yeah, and we're kind of encouraging people to take the first right step. You haven't got to have all of this figured out.
Yeah.
You learn and grow. If you try one career, like one athlete, was super interested in working in elite sport, but didn't like the commute to London and life in London, and wanted a life in the countryside. It's not until you experience these things and then have someone like me say, how are your needs being met, what's still missing, what next, to unpick those experiences a little bit, that you get a little closer to it. But I think we can't sometimes, like, it's got to be the best thing, it's got to be my life ambition of what I do next. But what are the little stepping stones to get you there, and what you're learning about yourself along the way?
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose, I personally don't fear change. I welcome change, and constant and never ending improvement for me is like, it's kind of like my own mission statement. And I'm one who, and I think we do as founders, and I think we do as consultants, I think we learn from our experiences, because you'll know and I'll know that some things have gone really well, fantastic, but it's the real learning happens when things don't go so well, and that's where the real learning takes place, and it becomes a real opportunity to take the good from an experience that may not have been so good, and how to, I suppose, rectify that for future, and how to learn the skills that we require to make it better if it happens on their own. Because we live life as human beings, and we're human beings first. We're not human doings, right? And you're absolutely right in terms of the work that you do. You it's very much a holistic approach to the individual, not their skill set, not their confidence, not their motivation, not their self-esteem, not what they've got, not what they've not got, but it actually is very much a holistic package, isn't it? That
Right.
that you support somebody on. And
Yeah.
that takes time, because, like you say, some people mightn't even know what they want to do, right?
No. Yeah, we're still figuring it out. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Is the blank page the best scenario for you?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because yeah, I think, there's an open mind to it. I don't
Hmm.
come with any judgment. I don't decide if someone gets picked or not. It's
Hmm.
they're they're open to discovery, I guess, to some extent, and but appreciate that there have been formative years that have got them to this point, and even connecting to what those are and the great transferable skills that life and sport has given them. It's a beautiful canvas to build upon, really, when you see people start to connect to that,
Yeah.
and how they want to define themselves, or how they want to portray themselves in the world. Yeah, I thoroughly enjoy those opportunities when people are brave enough, vulnerable enough, and willing enough to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I suppose every client that you work with and every organization you work with will be coming at it from a slightly different perspective, which kind of leads me to my next question, and it's one that has always intrigued me, especially in my own life. When I look to my life and I look to see what I've achieved in my life and what I've come through, I've often asked myself, is resilience in an innate experience? Is it part of us, or do we develop it? Is it something that's learned? And it's for me the $64 million question. Is it something that we learn, or is it something that we're born with? What do you think?
Yeah, pros and cons, I think, and an argument for both. But certainly,
Yeah,
sort of with my work with Google, it was very much a case that it's a skill that you can develop.
yeah,
It obviously some people, when we look at our serial Olympic medalists and Paralympic medalists, there are traits, I think, that are evident in that resilient space. That growth mindset, that ability to deal with setbacks, constantly picking yourself up when you get knocked down again. I've certainly seen athletes who feel more able and capable and willing to go there to constantly set very challenging goals for themselves, to constantly think about every day that how can I improve? What can I do today better than I did yesterday? Um, who are overt about the people they need in their corner to help them
mm,
get better,
mm,
and recognize and value the team that's got them there. And like, well, how are you going to make me get better? A really overt discussion about that. Um, so definitely I have seen those traits, I guess, within individuals more, from those who've been in my cultures and my environments.
mm,
But I genuinely do believe that it, as Google say, it is a skill that we all have within us. If you can connect to it more and understand what resilience means for you, it's not just perhaps some of those perceptions that you just keep going. It's and that you just push yourself to the limits, to burnout, to
mm,
to find that. It's about well-being at the core of that, and understanding what that means for you to thrive, to be healthy, to recognize when you need time out, what gives you energy, what doesn't give you energy, who those people are in your corner that are cheerleaders that can help you get there when times are tough. That's what I genuinely see in people who want to connect with this word resilience. It seems the thing a lot of people are after, but and there's been some great research out there, within elite sport that talks to this, especially around this sort of serial medalists. What keeps them going when they've already
yeah,
achieved greatness, really.
yeah.
And yeah, there's certainly some good research. I could certainly signpost people to, if that's of interest to them, to find out more about this, and what does that mean for people to embrace, to enable people to feel resilient within their environments and in life.
Absolutely. And I suppose all of us, to some extent, in the post-pandemic society and world that we live in now, where change is constant and it's fluid and almost on a daily basis, we are faced with new challenges, in our lives, whether it be personal ones, whether it be financial ones, whether it be emotional ones. Um, oh, you've mentioned some of the key golden nuggets that we need. We need a team around us. We need a group of people around us who are able to hold us up when we fall down, right? And that's
Yeah.
and that's massively important. I suppose within that too, we need to be able to learn from our experiences, both good and bad, in order to take from those experiences what we need to move on to the next chapter. Is there also a need, and you often find that with some sports people. Um, I'm not going to mention anybody specifically, but the people they have around them, uh, uh, constantly say yes and don't challenge the perceptions, and because of that, then sports people get into all sorts of difficulty and trouble because they feel untouchable, they feel unshakable, they feel, godlike in terms of their approach. I am who I am, and well, let's call it out. We had the whole issue with Lance Armstrong and the Tour de France, and you know, on paper, wonderful performance athlete, but behind the scenes, there was a whole load of other stuff going on, and he was surrounded with people who didn't give him the best advice and didn't give him the best approach. And so, is there a need? Is there a need? Is the secret ingredient in confidence, performance, and resilience? Is that honesty, transparency, and truth, authenticity? And I know those words get bandied about, but is it equally important in terms of the work that you do that we're honest with ourselves and honest with one another, Don?
Yeah, and I think you can quite easily be absorbed into a culture that kind of aligns to some of that practice that you think, well, how did I get myself there
Yeah,
to be in this place and not be genuine and authentic? But when you've got your own bills to pay and your own life to lead, you can see, and an athlete's kind of saying they want this, they need this, you're a great help to them. I couldn't do this without you. You can quite quickly and easily, I think, to some extent, be consumed and absorbed in that world. And
yeah,
sometimes sports, because I talk quite a bit about athletes perhaps becoming institutionalized, and perhaps as staff sometimes we do as well a little bit, because we may not necessarily have those outside influences to check and challenge whether this is good or right practice or not.
yeah,
So, I think, bringing outside people to give you thoughts around what they see in your culture and how they can best support you, or ideas from other environments, sporting and non-sporting, I think is important. We've obviously quite rightly had a lot of duty of care headlines in elite sport to check and challenge
hmm
when it doesn't go right, quite rightly. And I think from that, it is evolving to have the right processes and policies and practices in place that athletes can raise around bullying, harassment, grievance in environments, and for athletes to have their voice a little bit around this. But I always love like the trust equation and using the trust equation. If we're going to genuinely do this together to push people to their limits ultimately in
yeah,
these environments, you have to for performance, but you have to be honest about your self-orientation, what you're in this for,
yeah,
and you need to be technically led and managed if you're working in a sport for people to check and challenge you on that consistently. What are you here for, and what's your goals and ambitions? Is your orientation for self or to the service of someone else? And if it's for self, then there's some things that we probably need to check in on around this. We need to check in on of being present and creating an equal partnership of listening and not giving advice if advice isn't needed, allowing someone to find the solutions for themselves and their own life and where they go, and to make sure that we do what we say we're going to do, but yeah, so I think that trust equation is hugely important for me as sort of like the foundation and the building block to push people to their limits a little bit. Otherwise, what are you in this for? What are you personally going to gain? And is that for the development of self, which, there still needs to be some acknowledgement that that is a thing, for your own progression in your own career, but ultimately for the right reasons, that you're doing it for the right reasons for the athlete, and that athletes won't come to harm because of that. Really, is an area I think we've had to champion quite rightly in elite sport to do this, to win well. Ultimately, I guess that's why the name of my business is WinWell.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's what we all aspire to achieve, I think.
Yeah, and the definition of winning, I presume, will be different for everybody, right? For some, it might mean winning a gold medal. For others, it might mean performing to the best of their ability. Or is it crossing the finishing line? Is it all just about being first all the time? What's the motivating force, Don?
I think I've worked with I perhaps of 100 athletes I've worked with. For example, I can probably capture 10 who've won a medal, and I
Yeah,
I I hugely admire those other 90 as much as I admire those 10,
yeah,
because they've tried something, they've given it a go, they've experimented, they've made sacrifices or choices aligned to that decision that they're going to take that step in life and see where it takes them.
yeah,
And I would hate for those 90 to feel in some way a failure, because they've been bold enough and brave enough to give this a try. And that, through, I guess, connecting to someone like myself, hopefully seeing what it's given them, the experiences in life someone else may not have had because of that choice that they made,
mm,
and seeing what those life experiences have given them, connecting to them, the transferable skills they've gained. So yeah, I think everyone needs to define what their definition of success is, really, and it isn't always the outcomes. It's enjoying the ride, as they kind of say. It's connecting to those things and seeing joy in those things that life has given you along the way.
yeah. So it's not all work and no play. There has to be some element of play in there, right?
Yeah, for sure. And even in the work, like connecting with what that's given you.
Yeah,
Because there isn't always time for play. One of the sports, for example, they're away. Some of these athletes are away for 100 days of the year. It's hard to figure out when sometimes play happens, but let's figure out play in what you do as well.
absolutely, absolutely. Fascinating. It's just, it's Don. I could speak to you all day. I really could. I really could. The more we delve, the more we dive into it, the more fascinating it becomes. It is a fascinating subject. I'm just wondering when your book will come out, Don.
No, I should. Yeah, it's always been asked of me. Like when will the book arrive? And
Hmm.
and I hope to capture some of these thoughts and stories for people to be able to connect to and resonate to. I think quite often, sport gets put out there in like a motivational speaking kind of way,
Yeah,
and which people don't always connect to because it feels quite distant from their own lives. But I think by sharing some of these stories and athlete journeys of challenge, of setback, of worrying who I am if I'm not this anymore, of what's my purpose, what's my identity. We can all align to that in our lives. And so that's why I'm hugely being grateful to be let into these athlete lives and hear things perhaps they may not tell other people. Because I'm like, well, I can hear that, I can resonate with that. I've had that in my life, or I know someone else who's had that in their life. It's hugely relatable and connected to all of us.
absolutely. And I cite the example of Sir Chris Hoy at the moment, who is having his own struggles. Who has been a superb ambassador for his own sport, and now is ambassadorial in a whole load of different ways, not to mention his courage, his resilience and tenacity as he fights his own personal battle at stage 4 cancer, but being a really humbling and human, ambassador and a witness to the struggles that he's having, but also the joy that it can still bring, and the openness and honesty in which he's living his life now. It's an incredible transition, particularly for somebody who, in his own way, was at the very top of his game, right?
Yeah, and people are aligning even more so to that, I think,
Yeah,
than his medal successes.
yeah,
Some of
absolutely.
the most decorated Olympians, and yet, those stories of life that goes on behind it. That's why we love all these sort of Netflix documentaries. Well, I know I do right now. You're getting behind the skin of these things and these people, and realizing that, as glamorous as it may seem, actually the challenges are real that we all face.
Absolutely, and at the very least, we're all human beings to human beings and human beings to one another, and not one of us is not touched at some stage by struggle and adversity, and in those times we require courage, and we require truth, and we require honesty, and you're absolutely right. I think Sir Chris Hoy is a bigger ambassador now than he ever was in the world of sport, and he's done so much to help so many people across our country to raise the level of conversation around cancer, but also to support and to fundraise and to campaign and be ambassadorial to help and support as many people as he can, even in the middle of his own really difficult battles. What a true human being and what a true sports person. I mean, that must take some degree of courage to be able to do that.
Yeah. And I think, we quite often label our sports stars out, not just Olympic and Paralympic sport, but our footballers, our cricketers, our rugby players, our tennis players as sort of
Mm.
superheroes. And
Yeah,
yet, and so it's sometimes hard to be vulnerable, to say, I'm finding this hard because, well, you should be okay because, you're sorted, you've won this, or you're earning this, or life's given you this. And so I think sometimes for our elite sports people to show vulnerability, it's then okay for us to do the same. Uh,
yeah,
but yeah, it's just creating environments to enable people to do that.
interesting. Um, I suppose questions been on the list, and maybe not your bag, but a question that I feel a lot of people want answered. Will Novak ever retire? Is he just simply going to go on forever? When in championships, there seems no end to what he's bringing to the table, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is he superhuman? Is he a human being?
Yeah, I just, there's some athletes that just have such strong drivers in terms of their ambitions and what they want to achieve, and great teams around them, that it
including
takes
our
a
own
massive,
Andy, including
yeah,
our own Andy Murray as coach.
yeah,
What a combination!
yeah,
Adversaries become supporters. Wow.
and very strong in his beliefs and what it means to get him there, I think, in terms of
Hmm.
his physical well-being and mental health and what's required. And, hugely admire him for his longevity of his career, and
Hmm.
still wanting to get up each Monday morning or whenever it is,
And work it out. Yeah,
and and push himself physically, mentally, emotionally to that limit. And I'm sure he's got a great team around him to enable him to do that for sure.
incredible, incredible. You've not answered my question. Is he going to go on forever, though?
Yeah, uh, and what I always say though, please go on forever if that's what you genuinely want to do,
Yeah,
as opposed to I'm going on forever because this is all I can do, and I
yeah,
worry that I can't do anything else.
yeah.
I think that's a completely different mindset. So, I love it when athletes say, I want to go on forever, but I want to work with you around what next, or let's explore this. Or the other dream is that because of the work that they've been doing to understand their strengths, their values, their passions, their interests,
Mm,
that enables longevity of an athlete's career. That, it doesn't matter if I win or lose because this doesn't define me. I
absolutely.
can go on forever because I do know what I want to do in my next chapter, and that's enabling me to go on forever. Those are the types of conversations that, I was like, yeah, please go on forever if that's the philosophy that you're embracing, because that's a true testament to why bother, I think, in doing some of this work with a performance well-being coach to enable that longevity.
Mm.
That there's an even better reason for doing it then, not just for performance, not just for your well-being in the moment, but for your lifelong plan as well.
Absolutely. And I mentioned Andy Murray there, but there seems to be a seamless transition from sports person now to expert coach in a wonderful which felt like a really seamless, painless kind of transition out of, being in the spotlight, but still having that real power and tour de force, being able to influence at that highest level, somebody like Novak, in order to bring his own skills and experience and knowledge and wisdom and understanding to bear. And it's just, it just like seems the perfect marriage, doesn't it, in some sense?
Yeah, and trying to define what you want from that, as in terms of coaching or mentoring, or what are your needs really
Yeah.
from at that stage in your career when you've been there and seen it and done it. What do you need from that person? Where are your gaps of knowledge or skill or technical ability or motivation, really deep diving and kind of having a plan to see where
Mm,
those gaps might be, and enabling those to move forward. I did a bit of work with the Premier League around their sort of athlete to coach program,
mm,
because it's just making sure that you are ready to step into that space as a coach, that you do understand the differences between being an athlete and being a coach,
mm.
and how do you manage that specific transition, because a lot of our athletes make amazing coaches, but it's just making sure that you are accepting that your own career has ended as an athlete, and then what are the different skills or behaviors that you need as a coach, for a very different individual potentially in front of you than your own journey and your own athletic journey. So yeah, just trying to support people in that space, that they can feel like they are transitioning into that world of work. Some of our athletes in the first 100 days, may not have necessarily sent I guess a business email, or understand the politics of when to make tea and coffee in the environment, and all
Yeah.
those skills that
Wow.
we take for granted. So it's enabling people to kind of understand and explore those transitions as well into whatever working world they go into.
Oh, fascinating. I would love to be a fly on the wall to listen into some of the conversations that Andy would have with Novak and in terms of the dressing room, to find out, what I mean, the power, the tour de force, which are those two, are just incredible. I wait and see, I wait and see what happens, but certainly there's some great examples of what true effective transition looks like.
Yeah.
Dawn, I could speak all day, and sadly we've nearly run out of time. Just before we go, can you let the people know? Obviously, your links and everything will be available in the show notes of this episode. But where can people find you, Dawn, to find out more?
Yeah, so as you said, kindly said, I've got my own performance wellbeing podcasts on Spotify and all the other available channels. My website is www.winwell.org.uk, or please feel free to email me at dawn@winwell.org.uk. Yeah, I'd love to speak about this all day if anyone lets me, so I'll happily pick up with a conversation if people are curious to find out more. But thank you for having me and enabling me to share some of these stories today.
Dawn, it's been my pleasure and honor, and as I said at the outset, I'm standing on the shoulder of giants today because, you've been there, done that, worn that t-shirt, and you continue to positively influence so many in making those transitions, but also enabling them to be the very best that they can be in a very challenging environments sometimes. I wish you well done in terms of your own continued work, and I hope that this meager podcast episode will help in some way to spread your message far and wide that if people are requiring performance enhancements, or not performance enhancements because that sounds like something completely different, but if they need to improve their performance and improve their productivity, look no further than your work done, and the work that you do, and the amazing example you've given not only to others but to yourself in terms of making that wonderful transition from a life of sport to life of consultancy. So I wish you well done.
Thank you. You too.